Good evening. Today is August the 6th, and I'm going to continue on my video about are you living in gratitude or attitude? Living in gratitude is so important in our everyday lives. Biblical attitude extends beyond simple politeness. It is a disciplined posture of the heart that acknowledges God's sovereignty regardless of external circumstances. You sit there and you look at the distinction in verses 4. A critical nuance in biblical teaching, particularly in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, is the command to give thanks in all circumstances, not necessarily for all circumstances. In all circumstances, believers are called to maintain an attitude of trust and gratitude even during trials, persecution, or grief. This does not mean celebrating evil or pain itself, but recognizing God's presence and the potential to bring good out of suffering. Romans 8:28. The object of gratitude, the focus, remains on God's unchanging character, His goodness, steadfast love, and sovereignty rather than the temporary situation. For example, Job praised God immediately after losing everything, not thanking God for the loss, but blessing God's name despite it. And myself, I experienced, we sat there and we lost everything. Our house burned, we lost everything, and all we had were the clothes on our back. But, as I told the men at work who rose up and helped us, helped give us basic needs that we needed, clothing, dishes, stuff to get started back over. I told them, I said, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But this here helped restore my faith in mankind, and especially with the men down there at work, because they rose above and beyond to help us out. You sit there and you look at the example of Jesus and the apostles. The New Testament presents gratitude as a lifestyle modeled by Jesus and the early church leaders. Jesus frequently gave thanks before miracles such as feeding the 5,000 in Matthew 14:19 and raising Lazarus from the dead, John 11:41. He also instituted the Last Supper with a prayer of thanksgiving in Matthew 26:26, demonstrating gratitude even before his crucifixion. Paul's prison epistles, the Apostle Paul wrote letters filled with joy and thanksgiving while imprisoned and facing execution. In Philippians, written from jail, he commands believers to replace anxiety with prayer and thanksgiving in Philippians 4:6, proving that internal peace is independent of external freedom. Early church worship gratitude was central to early worship, expressed through psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Colossians 3:16, Ephesians 5:19. It was considered a sacrifice of praise. Hebrews 13:15, implying that thanking God can sometimes require spiritual effort, especially when feelings do not align with the act. And I have experienced it at our own church when we come together to worship. You can feel the presence of God in the place. I mean, it's just overwhelming at times. But we start out with prayer and then we go into worship and expressing our love and gratitude to Lord and His presence there to guide us. You look at the early church, okay, and they did the same thing. Giving thanks to God can sometimes require spiritual effort, especially when feelings do not align with the act. The Old Testament foundations showed that gratitude is a response to deliverance and covenant faithfulness, corporate worship, corporate prayer. After crossing the Red Sea, Moses and Miriam led the Israelites in a song of thanksgiving in Exodus 15, establishing a pattern of communal praise for divine intervention. Sacrificial system. Gratitude was institutionalized through thank offerings and peace offerings in Leviticus 7:12 through 15, where individuals brought sacrifices specifically to express thanks for answered prayers and deliverance. The psalm where King David and other psalmists often moved from lament to praise within a single prayer. Psalm 136 repeats the refrain, His love endures forever, 26 times, linking every historical act of God to His enduring love as the basis for thanks. If we look at the spiritual benefits and warnings, you sit there and you look at people who suffer from anxiety, okay? Philippians 4:6 through 7 presents thanksgiving as a key to unlocking the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, shifting focus from problems to God's faithfulness, and it guards the heart and the mind. You look at the sign of the end times, which you hear it all the time, and I'm apt to agree that it could happen anytime. Of course, we've been saying that for 2,000 years. But conversely, a lack of gratitude is listed as the defining characteristic of the last days. 2 Timothy 3:2 describes people in the end times as lovers of themselves, ungrateful, unholy, suggesting that ingratitude is a root sin that leads to further moral decay. What happens is people make it all about themselves instead of about the Creator. And our focus has always got to be on Him. When we start focusing on ourselves instead, you done hit the ditch. And then completion of faith. In the story of the 10 lepers in Luke 17, only one returned to give thanks. And he was told, your faith has made you well. This implies that gratitude completes the cycle of receiving God's grace, turning a mere transaction into a relationship. So, something for you to think about. And it's like I was actually had this discussion, as I mentioned before, with a couple of different people this week, and something that I said to one of my friends, because it just hit me. It said that when you live in a position of gratitude, you can't have an attitude. It's just so powerful. So, pray blessings over each and every one of you. I love you. And I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.